This is the story that has me fired up tonight. I don't know if fired up is the right term here, because I think that there is a whole lot of sadness in this story. People are hurting out there. The House and Senate packed their bags and left Washington until the middle of November. Politicians are fighting for their political lives as Americans, millions of Americans, are fighting just to put food on their table. 99 weeks ago, George W. Bush was president. Wall Street was getting $1 trillion bailout, and millions of middle-class Americans had lost their jobs. 4 million of those people have exhausted their unemployment benefits and have had zero luck getting back into the workforce. And once again, Senate Republicans have turned their backs on the 99ers. Senator Debbie Stabenow went to the Senate floor to try to give these Americans 20 additional weeks of benefits to help them out going into the winter. Well, Republican Senator George Lemieux, he blocked her.
Without knowing how much it's going to cost and how we're going to pay for it, while we are all certainly sympathetic and want to work to make people go back to work, my home state of Florida certainly suffering with very high unemployment, we need to know what it's going to cost. We need to know how we're going to pay for it so we don't put this debt on our children and grandchildren. So with that, Mr. President, I object.
Oh, come on. You know, Republicans, they just love to talk about debt when it comes to helping people in need, but couldn't care less when they're talking about tax cuts for millionaires. Senator Stabenow fired back on the floor at Lemieux.
When folks talk about the deficit and leaving deficit for our children, we will never get out of debt in this country until people get back to work, until they have good-paying jobs, and in between times. We will not move this economy forward until we are helping people be able to keep going in this recession.
On behalf of the 99ers last week, I spoke personally with Senator Stabenow, and I asked her to bring this to the Senate floor, because this would be the last opportunity for any kind of help until the middle of November. She told me she would, and she did. It's nice to know that there's a politician in Washington that is still good to their word. She is. And I made a commitment to stay on this story, but I'm afraid that this is the final chapter until after the election. A group of 99ers who call themselves Novos, they have pledged not to vote for any politician who didn't support Senator Stabenow's bill. 4 million people, think about that. They could make a major difference in this election. And the Novos have to decide if the Democrats are on their side. Their decision could affect everyone who's received unemployment benefits. Now, back on July 22nd, the president signed the Unemployment Compensation Extension Act of 2010, which extended benefits until November 30th. At the time, the bill covered over 2 million people. If Congress doesn't pass another extension when they get back in November, now we're up to over 6 million Americans will have zero money coming in the door heading into wintertime. In the meantime, Senate Republicans also blocked a bill which would have given a 2-year tax holiday to companies who create jobs in America instead of foreign countries. And wouldn't you know it that all 40 Republicans voted against the anti-outsourcing bill the same day the NBC News Wall Street Journal polled that 86% of Americans think U.S. companies outsource too much. Putting the puzzle together, the Republicans don't give a damn. Republicans would rather see American companies hire workers in China than give Americans who have, well, nothing, give them a measly $300 check to get them through the next week. The party who pretends to be, let's see, Christian, valued, wrap themselves in the flag, and blast these Lee Greenwood songs all over every campaign, really, they're just nothing but fraudulent, in my opinion. There's nothing more American or Christian than helping out your fellow man when they fall on hard times, and we are in the midst of hard times. Republicans have proven that they have no economic patriotism and only worship at the altar of the almighty dollar. So this election, and we'll talk a lot about this in the march on Saturday in Washington, this is really about the soul of the country, isn't it? I'm not convinced that it's base versus base, because there's a lot of people that are caught in the middle of this economic strife that didn't think that they were going to get outsourced, but they did, that are somewhat apolitical, that are just kind of novice news consumers. Mr. President, they are paying attention now. This is about morality. It's about loyalty to your neighbor, loyalty to your country. It's the selfish versus the unselfish. And I think if the Democrats, the majority party, think that 15 million unemployed voters can't make a difference in November, I think you got another thing coming. And I don't think there's any doubt about it. You have to roll it back in time. The way FDR did, he had those fireside chats. Mr. President, I think you're spot on when you say we got to buck up. I think you're spot on when you say it's inexcusable if people don't get into the process, and maybe we didn't want change, maybe we didn't want it bad enough. But I think that the unemployed people and the 99ers that I have communicated with, they're thinking a little different right now. You got to tell them that there is hope on the horizon. Mr. President, you got to speak directly to the unemployed. Directly to the unemployed, the people that don't have a job, the people that don't have benefits, the people that have been shafted by the Republicans in recent weeks, as soon as yesterday. Tell me what you think on our telephone survey tonight, folks. The number to dial is 1-877-ED-MSNBC. My question tonight is, do you think Republicans care about the American worker? Press the number 1 for yes. Press the number 2 for no. I'll bring you the results later on in the show. And I don't mean to be tough on the president. The president says the base, and I'm a baser, say, hey, we gotta buck up. We got to get after it. Be inexcusable not to be involved. I get all that. But, Mr. President, from a lefty, and from someone who has done a lot of town hall meetings, I really do. I think you need to talk straight to the unemployed, a special message that whereas the Congress has given up on them, you haven't. It'll make a difference. Joining me now is Senator who is fighting for the 99ers from Rhode Island, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Senator, good to have you with us tonight.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for what you're doing.
Well, I think it's important to speak to 15 million Americans that don't have a job that are wondering, now where do we go? What would you say to those people?
I think we need to keep fighting as hard as we can. I think you've identified the issues very well. The thing that's the most upsetting about all this is hearing folks on the other side say, you know, ending unemployment insurance for these folks, that's the kind of spur it'll take to get them back to work, as if they were lazy, as if there were a job waiting for them. The president's recovery bill brought 11,000 jobs to Rhode Island. That's 11,000 families with a paycheck who wouldn't have had it. But we still have, with our 12% nearly unemployment rate, about 65,000 families without work. The jobs just aren't there. And to now watch these 99ers come to the end of their benefits, I spoke about Nancy, who's worked in the insurance industry all her life from Portsmouth, Rhode Island. She's coming to the end of her benefits. Michael from Smithfield, truck driver, steady workers, solid people, and they don't know what to do. They're right up against it, and it's their homes that are at stake and foreclosure. It's being able to keep their health care going. It's knowing that they have a future, and I think it's important that we continue to speak to them and assure them, and we have to point out that they're, you know, what the Republicans are doing is just wrong.
What do you say to Senator Lemieux from Florida, who obviously is a short-timer? He's not running again. So it's like the Republicans picked somebody that nobody could get back at when it came to a vote. What do you say to him when he's concerned about the debt?
George is a good man, and I've worked with him on a lot of things. He is delivering a message for the party when he is forced to go to the floor and do that. If you take a look at Arlen Specter's wonderful speech on the floor the other day, he was a Republican for decades. He says he's never seen anything like it, and they're following a scorched earth policy. And George Lemieux having to go out there on the floor and deliver on that scorched earth policy was, I think, very unfortunate for him, not consistent with his values, but it's the party's values. It's what they intend to do, and they just couldn't care less that their scorched earth politics scorch a lot of earth for American families as well.
Senator Whitehouse, thanks for doing what you're doing and all your efforts in this. You're trying to help Americans out there. I appreciate it. Good to have you with us tonight.
Thanks. Good to be with you. Joining
me now is 99er Minion Veasley Fields, who has vowed not to vote in November. That was our last interview on this program a few weeks ago. Minion, the Democrats tried to do it. Is that going to be enough? Do you change your mind? Do the no-votes now get back engaged and get in the process? What do you think?
Well, Ed, yes, we have committed that we are trying now to encourage our fellow 99ers to vote. for either party of their choice. However, Ed, yesterday was very disappointing for us. And even though we are trying to tell them to vote, many of them are not going to vote, even though the no vote says to go ahead and do this. They were disillusioned by what they saw on the Senate floor yesterday. We are very grateful for Senator Stabenow for her effort, but we thought it was just sort of put together really quickly like a dog and pony show in order to get us to vote for them. This is the sentiment across this nation.
But if the Republican, but Minion, if the Republican senator had not stood up, this would have gone through and you would have had the votes and you would have gotten an extension. It's the Republicans. Why take it out on the Democrats, the majority party that time and time again has been there for the unemployed?
Well, you know, Ed, we have gone back in the history of the tiers. We as 99ers are trying to figure this out ourselves. What has happened is we can remember the time in which the Republicans said, sure, get another tier, use a stimulus fund. And the Democrats said, no, we need to find sourcing for unemployment. So now we're thinking back on that and we're realizing it's not the Republicans, it was the Democrats that caused us to be in the situation that we're in. We want the Democrats to come back before this election. And we want them to come back and rectify this, Ed.
Well, they won't do it. I mean, they're going to be out until the middle of November. And the president has asked you to engage. That's not enough.
We are engaging. The Novos has given our commitment to engage, to encourage American 99ers to vote. We have finally we've conceded to that. However, our president, we do need to hear from him.
Okay.
You know, Senator Whitehouse, he explained a 99er, and we want to be clear with the American people what a 99er really is. The presentation that they showed yesterday is not a 99er. It is an unemployed person, but not a 99er. The 99ers who have been without benefits for over 8 months is a 99er in the street, a 99er that is living in her car with her children, a 99er who is laying out on a park bench somewhere, a 99er who has moved in with their 90-year-old parents because they have nowhere else to go, a 99er who is in their apartment in the dark, in the cold, that will be coming soon. That's the real 99er, Ed. A 99er who is hounded by bill collectors every day that they live.
Yeah.
A 99er whose foreclosure is on its way. We have a 99er friend right now who has paid on her house for 17 years, Ed, and was just sent papers to tell her that it was time for her to go.
Well, Minion,
she only had...
As a broadcaster and as an advocate for American workers, I have to tell you that I'm at a loss. I mean, I did everything I could, and we're stuck, and it's unfortunate. And I hope that I think the unemployed people in this country can save the majority. I really do, and I hope they engage. And I think President Obama deserves to work with the majority for another 24 months. And if they don't get it done then make a decision in 12. But I mean, Bush had 8 years. You mean to tell me the progressives can't give this president, 48 months? I mean, it just amazes me. So.
Well, Ed, what I'm saying is this, is that we need some help. We absolutely need help. It's gone past understanding that.
Yeah.
What it is we have to have someone come and help us. We need to hear from our president.
Minion, good to have you with us tonight. Thank you for fighting. Thanks for standing up, and I appreciate your time.